Hi everyone, my name's Ellie and I'm the producer of GFMI's second annual Best Practices for Stress Testing in Financial Institutions industry meeting, which is taking place virtually from December 2nd till 3rd. The event will be looking at strengthening methodologies and frameworks for ad hoc, daily and annual stress testing to empower better decision making whilst overcoming COVID-19. Today we have an interview with one of the speakers of this event, Coryann Stefansson, who is the Managing Director, Head of Prudential Capital and Liquidity Policy from SIFMA. So thank you so much for joining us today. Do you just want to give a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. And hey, Ellie, thank you for having me. It's kind of neat to be able to join your event on stress testing. For those of you that know me or those that don't, stress testing is near and dear to my heart as I, along with Nellie Lang and probably 150 other examiners, had the great opportunity to run the first SCAP. So I've been connected to stress testing, at least from the Federal Reserve's perspective, for quite a number of years. Stress testing has existed in a number of different forms for many years, but the idea of capital stress testing is something that was really brand new. And I was, lucky enough to have the opportunity to get in on the ground floor.
Great, perfect. Thanks so much. So we'll just get into the questions now. So the first question
Sure.
is, what are the biggest impacts of COVID-19 on stress testing?
Sure. Well, the obvious first impact is unfortunately the human element, right? So there's so many people that by themselves or their family or that have been harmed by this horrible virus. So from that standpoint, there's that great impact. I always feel weird to lead with the business aspect without acknowledging first the human element or the human side of this. But when I think about the specific impact to stress testing, I think it comes in two forms. There's an impact in the approach and an impact in the data. I think in the approach, from an approach perspective, it's kind of neat because this event or this crisis is very, very different from what we saw during the Great Financial Crisis. During the Great Financial Crisis, issues and concern began in the banks and were completely focused on the banks. Unlike today, where at the COVID-19, you had an economic shutdown ordered by the U.S. government, or actually more broadly, the entire business sector throughout the globe were being shut down in several forms or in several timelines or for several periods. And this was external to the banks. So the banks this time were not necessarily the cause or a contributing factor to the crisis, but in fact have been helpful to the central banks for executing their financial stability agendas. They've been helpful by being able to provide liquidity to the capital markets. And then thirdly, I'd say that they've had the opportunity to provide credit to different business factors. So certainly this impact has shown us the approach to stress testing potentially may need to be a little bit different because, as I just described, it's a very different experience than what we had in 2009. I think, as we'll talk about later, I think this is a great opportunity for people who really spend a lot of time stress testing to think about how do you alter your approach, understanding that stress events can come from a number of different areas. The other part I mentioned when I think about COVID-19's impact on stress testing is on the data itself. So again, most models have been trained on the 2008, 2009 Great Financial Crisis, which really is a very limiting event because it only thinks about events that happen within a bank or from a bank. And you have huge deposit runs, you have lack of confidence with the banking system. This is a very, very different experience than what we're seeing today. So therefore, again, we'll have a wider breadth of data, which will be able, I think, to allow for more flexible approaches when you think about stress testing.
Okay, great. That's really interesting. Thank you. So the next question is, what are your thoughts on the current regulatory environment within stress testing and where do you see this going?
Right. So as I mentioned, just in the last question, this is a very different experience from 2008, 2009. And most of capital policy or capital stress testing policy across the globe has been written based on the 2008, 2009 crisis. So I think the current regulatory environment, I think, will responsibly reflect back and think about how stress testing should or might change as a result of the event that happens outside of the banking system versus one that happens within the banking system. I think the other thing I would add is that I think regulators have spent an awful lot of time developing credit models. They've been awesome. This is their bread and butter business. Those have been, you see year after year, you see enhancements. I think that's less so on the capital markets, and I hope they take this opportunity, particularly when they think about their PPNR, their pre-provision net revenue models, to take the opportunity here to really advance the revenue models for trading products, as well as thinking through expense items and better correlating those to banks' actual performance versus a very, very blunt approach.
Okay, great, thank you. So the next one is, what challenges have been faced within stress testing in the remote working environment?
I think across the board, everyone, I think, is a bit surprised how seamless the transition has been from being in the office to being working from home. I think companies should be happy. I think we're all working harder and longer, and it's kind of hard to figure out what day begins and when it ends. But I think for the most part, where I can tell you the moment you start to get your head around what was going on. We were in the middle of the stress test for 2020. And my first thought is, wow, I'm not sure that people are going to be able to process all the data because you're dealing with such gigantic data sets when you think about capital stress testing. I was thinking that there's no way they're going to be able to do it. And sure enough, banks were able, I mean, it just is a reflection of my age, that the capacity of these home computers and what you have at home are just amazing. And so what I think, where I thought we would see struggles, or real significant struggles, I think we saw maybe some hiccups at times. People might have had problems again with the data issue, but I think people have learned to adapt. And the Zoom call, as everyone knows, Zoom calls are an everyday part of life, and that allows you to do your corporate governance around stress testing. It helps you connect with people when you talk about the scenario design. It helps you put together your groups when you think about project management. So I think actually there I would give banks 1, COVID 0.
Okay, great, thank you. Next one is, in terms of technological investments, what areas do you see the industry focusing on over the next sort of 3 to 6 months?
So I think that technology investments usually have a longer tail than the 3 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. Certainly there's going to be an operational perspective, right? A lot of this, working from home and ensuring that you have the capacity for a whole bunch of users being outside in an office. I think clearly that's something that is first and foremost on banks' minds. But when I think about stress testing specifically in technology, I think, again, the more seamless that the whole stress testing production cycle is, the more efficient it is, the cheaper it is to run, the more quickly one can turn around those numbers, the more potentially you can embed that into business decision-making processes on a much more expeditious way. Maybe being able to do sort of, some kind of scenario analysis on actually capital stress testing in a much quicker at the actual user level. So I think that's where technological investments are going.
Okay, great. And then the last question is just kind of about the conference in general, really. So in terms of our platform, because our conferences are quite informal and intimate peer-led meetings where speakers and delegates are all senior executives from top institutions, how do you see that sort of assisting with overcoming the challenges that you're currently facing or the industry are currently facing?
I think when a number of organizations that are subject to the same rules and expectations are able to get together and actually have a very open and transparent dialogue around their challenges, their advances, things that they've done that, that they thought they couldn't and they did, their challenges of where they seem to have problems, potentially where they might have solved them. I think all of that is a rich experience for your different attendees. I find as part of my work at SIFMA, we have a lot of member groups where, when I first started, I wasn't sure the cross dialogue. And now that everyone's sort of gotten to know each other, it's great. We send emails, well, wait, we're dealing with this struggle, or we're struggling with this. How are you guys dealing with it? And it's not about giving away proprietary information, but it's helping people to understand how you attacked a problem and how potentially you solved it. And I think these types of meetings, even when they're online, make you a smaller group, introduce you to people that have most likely the same struggles as you do, and you're able to go back and forth about things that you've thought of, things that you've attempted, and things that you've attacked and solved.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, that is all of the questions. So again, thank you so much for joining us for this interview today. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at the actual event online.
Yes. Thanks, Ellie. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks so much. Thanks. Bye.